I was going to talk to you really about React server actions and server components, but then this thing happened. Now, with a raise of a hand, anybody doesn't know what this I'm referring to? Okay, there are a few hands. Has anybody here not heard of React to Shell just yet? Okay. So, of all the people who raised their hands, anybody still running React 19 in production? Okay, still a few hands I see. Okay, so before I go into my talk and before we talk about anything else, I just want to tell you, the moment you leave the room, you open your laptop and you upgrade. Because just 15 days ago, a new security vulnerability in React Server Components and React Server Actions, React 19, was discovered, basically allowing an attacker to gain shell access to your machine, server. And, well, the React team patched it with React 19.2, great success, but Christmas is coming early this year, and we got 2 more security vulnerabilities over the weekend, or at least we got them a few weeks ago, but only now they got published. Denial of service, causing the server to hang, and also allowing an attacker to gain access to actually view the source code of your server components. So I came here to talk to you about how cool server components and server actions are, and of all times, exactly now. So this is pretty cool. And really, this thing could have been prevented. I mean, obviously, it's not that easy, but with proper input validation, and this reminds us that we need to do our validation on the client and in the server as well. And if you're really serious about form and input validation, maybe you should check out Fast. Separate topic, but it's a form validation library that I build. Very soon it will come as version 6, like 2 weeks or so. Check it out. And yeah, so hi, I'm Evyatar. I'm a software engineer at Meta. I am the author of Vest, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's get started. Server actions are asynchronous functions that are executed on the server, regardless of whether we use them from client components or server components. They can be used in the client components and handle form submission, mutations, and also fetch data. So that's pretty cool, but it doesn't mean much yet. They were popularized and introduced in ReactConf 2023, and they caused a big commotion because it looked a lot like what we used to see in our good old days PHP when we mashed up server code and client code. You remember 2005 WordPress site. I'm looking at you, Dima. But I'm throwing shade at PHP, but really everything I do at work at Meta is still pretty much that, working on PHP. I mean, it pays my wage, so that's fine. But let's go back to server components. What are server components? Well, if we wanted to take our normal component, it would look something like this. And if we wanted to turn it into a server component, the only distinction between a server component and a client component is that it can be async. That's it. That's a server component right there. But if we wanted to pair it with server actions, for example, what we needed to do is basically add an action to our form, for example, and write some stuff inside or put it in a different file, and make an async function, and I don't know, get some data from a form, add the use server directive, get some data, and I don't know, save it to the database. So that's pretty easy. That's pretty nice. And if we wanted to do that in a client component, it would be very similar, only that instead of an async function, we would have the use client directive, have our server action in a different file, again with the use server directive, and call that action from our form. That's pretty much it. It's a client component using a server action. That's nice. Now, like hooks, server components and server actions come with some rule. First rule, we do not have hooks or interactions. Because it's running on the server, we cannot have interactions, no click events, no touch events, and we can't have lifecycle hooks like use state or use effect. A server component can contain a client component, but a client component cannot contain a server component. It's obvious, come on. And lastly, because of that, and because we cannot pass like complex objects like classes or promises, it's a tricky one. But technically, we can only pass serializable data. So JSON, you would say. Only things that can pass as a string. For example, no closures, no scopes, everything that runs like that. Functions, no. Even though they did come up with a way of serializing promises, but that's some trick in React 19 and server actions and server components. And it does come with benefits as well, because we can co-locate our server code and our action code and our client code or our function code and our components. It's really nice. We don't need component states in many of the places that we actually did need component state before, and I'll show you that very soon. And lastly, we don't need API routes. We can have direct calls from our component in the client to the server without writing the dedicated APIs. I think Dan talked about it in the first session of RPC. And we also have 3 new dedicated React hooks, React 19 hooks, which are use action state, use form status, and use optimistic. And we talk about use action state. It allows us to update the client component state based on the result of the form action. And I'll show you that very soon. We have use form status. It allows us to get the current information about the last action or the form submission. For example, if the form is currently pending and waiting for a response from the server. And lastly, use optimistic. I like this name. It allows us to optimistically update the UI. So imagine if I send something, and before I even get the response back from the server, I can already show something without needing to do a lot of extra steps that I would do before. So this is pretty much all the introduction that we need. And now we're going to the artistic part. I don't need this one. So we're going to take an existing application. So let's imagine just a contacts app that has my 3 contacts here. And it has like very basic features like, I don't know, favorite of a contact. We have a favorite list. We can create a new contact. In the same form, we can also update a contact. So it's the same form only based on the props that it's given, if it has a contact or not. And we can also send messages with a pager to the contact, so hello, and it goes and sends the message to the user. So that's pretty much it. And it uses only client components, only legacy React, and only API routes. And what we're going to do is try, with the 22 minutes that we have left, migrate the entire application with the entire functionality of the application from using client components and API routes to using server actions and server components. So I'll start with the most basic one. Let's take the favorite function, which is nice. You can click favorite, and let's see how it's structured. So let's open, and I'm going to use anti-gravity. I don't know if it's a good idea, but I'm going to use an AI editor just to try it. So let's go to the favorites API route. This is on the server. So what we're doing, we're getting to the server with a put request. We're checking if the contact is currently favorite. And then if it's favorite, we're deleting it from the favorites table, or otherwise we're creating it in the favorites table. So I don't think we need all that. I actually think we don't need the entire file. So let's just remove the entire directory. So it's not going to work anymore. Okay. And let's go to our favorite button component. This is the favorite button. Let's see what it does. So we have some, it's a client component. We see it says use client. It has some state, and it goes out on click and does a fetch request. Now, I know it's not the ideal way of doing that, but we're going to delete that anyway in a second. So let's delete this, and let's delete the state, because you remember the rules. No live interaction and no state. Let's remove the on click. And also, let's remove the state and the use client. Now, as I said, the only distinction between a local component, client component, and a server component is that a server component can be async. Okay, so this is now an async component or a server component, and it's showing, but it's not doing anything. As you see, I click and nothing happens. To make it into a client component, a server component with server actions, let's also add here a form. Now, a form is the standard way on the web of interaction with our server. So it makes sense that it would work this way. And this is one of the things that I like about server components, server actions. They actually help us adopt better web standards. So let's go here and do form action on our button. And let's try async function. And let's annotate it with the use server directive. And now we put here the existing favorite. Prisma is our ORM. If you don't know the syntax, it's pretty simple. It's pretty much what you see here. And let's import our client. We don't have the response from next anymore, so we don't need that. And let's also do contact.id. We're getting that from the component. Now, on the server, we checked if our user is actually favorite or not. But here we don't really need it because we get that from the component's props, which is making reducing one redundant call. So all I need to do is check if contact.is favorite. And now what we have here, let's see. We have a form, we have a button, form action, which is automatically the submit action because it's the only button in the form. And right when we click it, it goes to the server. And if the context is favorite based on the component's props, it either deletes it or creates a new one. And only lastly, what we want to do is refresh the information. So let's do revalidate path. And yeah, that's it, I think. Now, if I try to now favorite the contact or unfavorite, let's zoom in. We'll see that everything refreshes even though there's no client state involved. So I'm clicking, and you see the favorite going in and out, and it's actually updating on the server. So it was really easy, but that's a very simple component. Let's try something more advanced, because this one, again, it was super easy. We have the new contact. So this one has some more interactivity. We have like 4 different inputs. We have a save, we have a cancel, and when we save, we also want to show its saving indication. So there's a lot going on, and you would imagine it would require a lot of state and a lot of client stuff. So let's see what we can do. Contact form. Let's go to the component of the contact form and see what we have here. So yeah, we have a router for reloading the page or redirecting back to the home page. After we save, we have the state. Let's remove that because if we want to do a server component, we cannot have state. Let's remove the is saving state because, again, it's a server component. Let's remove all that because it's a server component. And let's see what we have left here. Well, we have the handle submit. It's a big function that goes to the server and updates the states. Well, we don't have that anymore. And we have the handle change whenever we change something in the input. Well, what would we do? Like, what did we do in the past when we did not have handle change? How did we update inputs? Well, we just updated inputs. We didn't need to actually set the input in a state. They would just work out of the box like the browser does. So let's remove all the handle changes from our inputs because that's what our browser does the best. And well, on our forms or on our inputs, we have the value, but we don't need that anymore. So let's just tell React, if you have a value, put that. If not, don't do anything. React has a default value prop. And instead of getting it from the form data, which was our previous state, let's take it from our initial data. Okay, so we have that. And let's see, we have the is saving. I still don't know what to do with that one because that's some interactivity. So let's just remove it. And yeah, let's remove the handle submit. And if everything works correctly, or if I did everything correctly, it should load, but it should not do anything because, well, we did not add any interaction. So let's try to go into our actions and create an add contact server action. And let's see, oh, it already gives us pretty good recommendations. So I'm actually using that. And let's see, so we're taking the form data object. This is the same web standard form data object that we have in the browser for accessing the DOM and the DOM form data. So it's pretty much the same, and we're getting it. We're getting the first name, last name, phone number, and email. And all we want to do now we don't want to revalidate path. We want to reload back to the home page. So let's redirect. And go back to the home page. And now if I try to type something, it will not work because we did not connect it to the form yet. So let's just go to the form. and do an action is going to be add contact. And if I refresh, and let's add myself as a contact because why not, we have the contact as me, and also let's unfavorite them, and I'll be the favorite now. Okay, so we have that. This works. And again, we removed all of the client-side interaction, but what about the more complex kind of things like, I don't know, updating a contact? Is that more difficult, really? Well, let's see. I think we can pretty much reuse everything we did here and take it to the update contact. So I'm doing this, taking it here, and instead of that, we're going to do update. But, well, we have an issue because we need to know which contact to update, and, well, it is correct, we need the ID, but how would we pass the ID to the form now? Because, well, in the past we had like a fetch request, we put it in the body, but here we don't have an ID input. What do we do? Well, we do what we did back in the days when we needed to send data to the server without the user seeing that. We add an input of type hidden. This is a thing. It used to be a thing, and it's making a comeback now. So it's nice that it does good completions, by the way. We've come a long way. So we're adding an input type hidden, name of ID, and it takes the ID of the user. And all we want to do now is if the initial data has the ID in it, we're going to update the user, or otherwise it's going to add a new one. So let's do, like, let's go to me, and I don't know, let's add an emoji. Yeah, that's going to be nice. So we updated the user with, I don't know, almost nothing, only adding one hidden input and adding a component, and adding a function that looks pretty much like the previous one. And it does look like the previous one, so why not use one function to do them both? So let's go to the API routes. We add the API for creating a contact. We don't need that anymore. We just deleted it and replaced it with server actions. And let's see, we have the, yeah, that's contact update. Let's remove that because we don't need that anymore because we added to the server action. Let's take the add user, remove it. Update contact is going to be useful because it looks very much like what we need. So let's remove it and take it to the upsert contact. Upsert is like update and insert all at once. And let's do upsert. That's going to be our server action there. And let's take the data, const data equals this thing, and just, yeah, when you create, use the data, and when you update, use the data. Yeah, it looks pretty much right. So let's go back to the form because we now have broken imports. So let's go to the form, remove the imports, and use upsert without making any check. Upsert contact, and now let's try Evyatar the second. Yeah, we have that. And let's try now with an exclamation mark, or many of those, and it works. So that was pretty easy, but if that action takes a lot of time, so I mean like, I don't know, a second or so. So let's do a wait, set timeout. No, that's not the one. Set, yeah. I think that's the one. No, that's not the one. That's the one? I don't know, it's one of those. Slash promises? Is that not? Okay. Yeah, you were right. He agreed with you. So let's do that, and now we'll see that if we try to save, it just hangs for a moment here, and that's not nice. And this is the nice thing is, remember the second rule of server components and server actions? A server component can contain a client action, but a client action cannot contain a server component. Wait, no. A server component can contain a client component, but a client component cannot contain a server component. And, well, we're going to rely on that because even though this is a server component, it can contain a client component like our submit button. And our submit button can have lifecycle hooks like use form status. So what we're going to do now is take the pending state of our current form and try it here. So let's do, if it's pending, let's say it's saving, and just like that, when I click save, we're going to see the saving, and look how much code removed from our component and from our server. It's like, almost all of it. But again, this is a really easy example because, well, not a lot of interactivity, not live data. What if we want to use that in a client component, like a proper client component, like, I don't know, in a pager? And for those of you who don't know, pagers are something from the 90s. They allowed you to send, and 90s and before, allowed you to send messages. They made a comeback last year, but just for a brief moment. Yeah, I don't know why. So basically, and I like the idea of a pager in our app because it doesn't require me to actually code the client sending data back. It's one way. So it's like I did it out of laziness. So hello, it's sending the data, and it kind of works, but I don't imagine this being a proper server component. I imagine it being a client component because it does need some reactivity and interactivity. So let's go to our pager component and see what it does. So, oh my God, it does a lot of things. It is a client component. It has state for the input value, the current input that we're typing in, but we already know that we don't need that. We saw that we don't need that. We have the list of messages in the state. We have the loading state. It's like a bunch of things, but I think, oh, and yeah, so many functions here. Handle send message, handle mean input change, and use effect, and oh my God, I think we can do without all of those. And let's try one by one. First of all, I told you I already think that the browser does a good job just showing you the value and updating input forms. So let's just remove those. And yeah, so this one won't work anymore, the handle send message, especially if we want to clear out the input. Well, we don't have state for that anymore, so let's remove handle send message. And also let's remove the handle change because we don't have the state for that anymore. So we remove that. We're seeing that this one doesn't exist anymore, so let's remove this one. And we don't have value and we don't have on change, so removing all of those. And let's see, we don't have this and we don't have that. Removing a lot of stuff. And the one thing I like is deleting code. I'm not really good at writing it, but this works, I think. We're going to see something nice here. So we have a pager component that doesn't really do anything, as you see. It's just refreshing the page because that's what forms do. They refresh the page. So what can we do? Well, the first thing that we want to do is actually send a message. So let's go and see the send message function that we wrote before that we had on our server. Yeah, we can copy that. So let's remove it. Let's remove the entire file. You know what? I'll remove just this function. And let's go to send message. And it's going to look somewhat like this. And yeah, wait. It's getting the data. Yeah, it's getting the data correctly. And we need to now return the new message to the client. And I say I have 7 minutes. I think we'll make it. Return. Let's spread the message. And let's also work with proper timing right now. So let's do timestamp. Is a message not created at. It's going to be timestamp, yeah, to isostring. So this is the one I'm going to use. And now we actually need to use it in our client component. So let's go back to the pager, and we'll see the second hook that React gave us, which is use action state, sorry. And I'm not going to tell you what it does yet and how it works, stop it. But before that, let's try to code in the interactivity. So let's write a new async function and call it send, just a send. It's going to take 2 arguments. Again, the first one is going to be unknown. I'm not telling you yet. And the second one is going to be the form data, which is, again, going to be form data type. OK, perfect. What? What does he want? Form data? Yeah? No? Oh, capital D? Yeah, OK. And now we're going to call the server action with that. No, it's not going to be a use server. It's going to be client action. But we're going to call send message that we have on our server. And what we'll do here is just set the new state with the message received from our server. So message, OK. And so let's do set state, set messages. Yeah, and let's see the completion. Yes, but I think we want them in reverse order because the last message is going to be at the end of the messages. So yeah, let's do that. And Now, this action can be used by useActionState, and it takes some second argument. Again, I'm going to put it as null for a second, or for a few minutes. And let's see what it gives us here. Const, and then we get this one. We get something that we don't know what it is yet. We get the form action and the pending state. So we already see that we have the pending state. We can remove the isLoading. So let's remove isLoading, and isLoading. Yes. And we have and use the pending state instead of that. And now we have the form action. And instead of the form action, or for the form action, let's do here the form action. And just to see if everything works correctly now, before we even completed our work, let's do hello again. Yeah, it works. So we have a message sending through the server with the server action, but I promise we're going to remove a bunch more. So let's see what we have here. So you see here the fetch messages and the use effect. I think that's the key for removing everything, because while we have actions that can actually get data, save data on the server, they can actually get data for us. So let's make our pager component actually be able to get messages, or let's call it initial messages. Messages, yeah. It's going to be a messages array, and it's going to be taking an initial messages from the server. So let's go and get to the get messages action. And let's do, I hope it works. Yeah, okay, it actually does work. And let's get the message and sort out the timestamp. Yeah, I think that's the right one to do. And now let's go to the pager container. This is the component that contains the pager, and let's do, yeah, that's correct. We're getting the messages, we're passing them down to the pager component, and this works nicely. So we have the initial messages, and well, the second argument of useActionState is actually the initial state. So I think we can actually remove the messages from that and do initial messages and pass the messages here. Now, we don't have a state setter anymore because we don't do useState, but apparently this function is not only an action, but it's also a state setter. So what we can do here is remove this thing and just return the message. And the prev, well, that's the previous state here. That's the unknown one, not prev. Yeah, sorry. And it's going to be of type messages. So now let's see messages. Yeah, it's not working. So let's see what get messages does. It returns this one. It should work. Pager container. Let's see, get messages. Okay, I needed to update the import. And trying again. And it's sending the message, updating the client states. Got it. Okay, can I do 2 more? Okay, 2 more minutes. Okay, because I wanted to show you how we can actually update the state based on the intermediary stuff. So let's say it takes a lot of time to send the message. So let's do send messages. Let's do, that's the update one, but let's do this. Yeah. Yes, no, set timeout, promises. Yeah, that's going to be the good one. And the nice thing about this one, let's go to the pager component. Now I'm going to run over this very quickly, but we got the optimistic state, or use optimistic. Use optimistic allows us to actually set an intermediary state for the state update before this server action actually concluded. And the nice thing here is we can take the initial messages state and a state setter, so for example, prev, and let's try, yeah, it does the correct thing, and this is the new message, and now let's do const optimistic messages and add optimistic message. And what we'll do here is, right before the slow operation, let's add an optimistic message. So it's going to take the same payload of that message, and here, instead of rendering all of our messages, let's render the optimistic messages. So this is instead of creating an intermediary state, putting the optimistic message inside, removing it once it resolves, React does that for us. So now, if it takes a lot of time, we're seeing a message even though it's still sending, but this doesn't look very nice, so I created some styling for that. So let's do, let's add the styles.optimistic. And you know what, let's add it also to the message. So let's say it's optimistic, and let's add it here. It's going to be optimistic, and we're going to get the optimistic style. Even the message is optimistic, and even let's do right here, just now. And I'll zoom in, and we'll see that. So yeah, wait, here. We're seeing the just now. Now, it's probably, we just saw that with a different just now. Now, I probably got my class name incorrectly, but I don't care. It actually works very nicely because we're seeing here the client-only message on the server, and then we're seeing the message coming from the server, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I just wanted to show you how cool it is and how much we were able to actually achieve by removing a lot of code, adopting many of the web standards, and actually getting stuff right and easily. And I know that many of you are currently worried using React server components and server actions because it's been compromised, okay? But really, I just want to let you know that the React team has been doing tremendous work actually communicating this correctly, patching it safely, and doing everything they can that this does not occur again. And for every new revolutionary piece of tech, stuff like this happen. Keep using React. Do awesome stuff. Thank you.